Okay, this is section 2.1, and we're going to dive a little deeper into quadratic functions today. We're just going to start by refreshing that a parabola has this as its basic parent function. The a in front is determining whether or not the parabola opens up or opens down. So if we have a positive a value, we open up. And if we have a negative a value, we open down. For both of these functions, though, we have that low point and this high point, that min and that max, and both of those places are called the vertex of the parabola. And then the vertex is always on this imaginary line that's right there, and that line is called the axis of symmetry. So it's kind of that middle place of the parabola. You can actually find that by doing negative b over 2a, a little throwback to Algebra 2. Hopefully that looks slightly familiar to you. We'll use it down here to find a couple of different values. There are 3 different forms of quadratics that we're going to look at, kind of like when we taught you 4 different ways to write equations of lines. And then we just asked you to pick one. So same here. I'm going to show you 3 different ways, and some have pros and cons, and then you just kind of pick the one that works the best for you or that you feel like you can remember the best. So vertex, this one's really easy. In vertex form, all I have to do is pluck out the h and then the k, and that is my vertex. Maybe make yourself a note for sure that this, whatever's inside with the x, I have to do the opposite. So if this happens to be a -4, make sure you do +4. Or if it's a +2, make sure you do -2. With the k value, that you're just going to keep that. Whatever that is, you're just going to keep it the same. So just like when we were doing transformations in the last unit, whatever's inside with the x, I need to do the opposite. So very easy vertex to find. Y-intercept, we're just going to let the x be 0. Oh, I forgot to write let. Let x equal 0. And then when that happens, you plug your 0 in, you do your math, you find out your number, and your y-intercept is going to be 0, and then whatever you get. The zeros for this one, they're also called roots, and they are also called x-intercepts. Any of those, they all kind of mean the same thing, and they're just talking about the places where the parabola hits the x-axis. So like, where it hits the x-axis, that's what we're looking for. So the roots, the zeros, the x-intercepts, they can be found in vertex form, but you first have to FOIL out your whole function. And that kind of is a little bit of work because we have to write that twice and FOIL. Whoops, not with a squared. We have to write that twice and then FOIL. I said twice and then wrote it too. So you're going to FOIL all this out. Once you get it all FOILed out and all like terms together, it'll look something like that. And then you've got some options. You can do the quadratic formula, which I have put on your calculator. Or if you haven't gotten to me yet, make sure that you take care of that in the next day or 2. You can also factor this if you are a factorer, or you can use your calculator, and I'll show you how to do all 3 of those. Next one is called the quadratic form. It has its pros and cons as well. Vertex is a sad face on this one. It's a little more difficult to do. You're going to have to do negative b over 2a. We were talking about that before. That's going to find you your x value of your vertex, and then you're going to plug your x in to the function to find y. So just your normal kind of, first we're going to find x, then we're going to plug our x in and find our y value. That is going to be our vertex. So it takes a little bit more work. It's not difficult work, but it takes more effort than this one did for vertex. Y-intercept, we are still going to let x equal 0, and usually that turns out to just be this c value on the end. And so that's just going to be 0, and then whatever number you get should just be your c value. Zeros, what's nice is this one's already FOILed out, so we don't have that work to do. So we've got the same 3 options. We can do the quadratic formula. We can factor this if you are a strong factorer, or we can use our calculator to help us figure it out. Last one, intercept form. This is a throwback to Algebra 2. Vertex here, I don't know, it's probably also a sad, oh, sorry, zeros here are a little bit easier because I've already got this FOILed. I meant to write that there for you. Vertex here still takes a little bit of work. If you are factored out in this way, your vertex is actually found by doing p plus q divided by 2. And that's your x value. And just like this guy, once you find your x, you're just going to plug in to find your y. And that's how you find your vertex. So not super easy. I mean, I got to do some plugging in and figuring out. Your y-intercept, you're still going to let x equal 0. And then do your simplifying and see what you end up with. So you're going to have a 0 and then a number. And to find your zeros or your x-intercepts, they actually are really nice on this one. So you get to just say that your x-intercept is at p. sorry, I'm just totally brain farting. I'm putting it into the point that it would be. So it'd be P0, that's your x-intercept. And then your other x-intercept is Q. And so the point would be P0 and Q0. Those would be your, again, you're finding your x-intercepts in that box. Okay, so we're just going to do 4 different examples, each trying kind of one of each of those ways. So the first one is in vertex form, so just kind of follow this box along, and we're going to do each of those steps to find each of these values. So vertex first, I just get to pull the numbers out. So remember, do the opposite of what's in parentheses, so it's a -1, and then pull the 3 down, done, vertex. So -1, 3, looks good. Factors, those would be kind of tricky. I don't have this factored out. It's not in like 2 parentheses where I can pick out my factors. Also, my zeros are kind of tricky. I'm going to have to FOIL all that out, which is going to take a little bit of work. My y-intercept, though, that's a little easier. I just put a 0 in for x. 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 squared is 1. 1 times -2 is -2. And then plus 3 gives me a 1. So 0, 1 is my y-intercept. That's nice. That's my vertex. The negative tells me I'm pointed downward. And this has to be reflected on the other side of the parabola. So I kind of already know what shape I'm having. I just need to nail down those zeros so I kind of get that part exact. So we have to FOIL this out. I'm just going to write it down here. So I got a -2x plus 1. Remember, you got to write that twice. Do a little foiling. So x squared plus 2x plus 1. Now distribute our -2. And I'll add those last 2 terms together to make our like term of plus 1. It does not look like an easy factor, so I'm going to actually utilize my quadratic formula program, and I'll show you how to do it on your calculator graph as well. I'm not getting a lot of light right there. Although everywhere is seemingly bad. Okay, how about right about there? If you hit, no, that's not going to work. So if you hit the program button, within your program you should see somewhere Quad. That's the program I have dropped onto your calculator. So I'm going to hit enter on that. It brings it out to your home screen. Your calculator is not running the program yet, so you hit enter one more time. And then it's going to start prompting you for the 3 numbers. So your A value is actually found right here in front of the x squared. Your B value is found in front of the x, and your C value is the one in the end. It kind of follows this form right here, A, B, C. Please make sure that you take the negative with, but don't take the variable. So we're not typing x's in here, we're just typing the number. So -2, and then -4, and then +1. And so it's going to give me my roots, which again are the same as your x-intercepts, same as your zeros. So our zeros happen to be at -2.2 and 0.22. That's our x-intercept, so I'm just going to go to -2.2-ish right there, and then +0.2 right about there. Totally matches where we were at shape-wise for our parabola. That was really bad drawing. In order to create your factors, you're just putting that in a parenthesis. So I'm going to take my 0 and plop it back in here, so it'll be x plus 2.22. Remember, we do the opposite of what's in parentheses, so mine was negative, goes in as a positive. This one's positive, it's going to go in as a negative. Next up, I am in quadratic form. So this is kind of the steps we're going to follow in order to fill out each of these questions. So first up is vertex, which is -b over 2a. So -1 all over 2 times 1 gives me a total of a half. And then our job is to actually plug that in. So it's going to be a little tricky to get all of that typed into your calculator correctly. So what I do find is easier for kids is to turn it into a decimal. That's much easier to type into your calculator. And you should get -6.25. So there's our vertex. Sorry, you're going to be a little off the chart here. So there's a half, there's 4, 5, 6-ish, 6.25. I'll just make that kind of big and obnoxious. Then we need to find our factors. I'm a factorer, and this kind of factors, it's a pretty nice factor. So I got an x and an x. I need things that multiply to 6. So 6 and 1 or 3 and 2, and only the 3 and 2 option can get me to a 1 right there. So 3 and 2, and I'm negative, so my bigger number needs to be negative. Even if you didn't know how to do that, or factoring kind of eludes you, you've got the quadratic formula with a really bad bright light right there. So we'll just do the quadratic formula again. and I've got a 1, a -1, and a -6. So my roots are 3 and -2, which is exactly what I found. So if your 0 is at 3 and -2, remember you would do the opposite. That's a +3, so you put it in as a negative. That's a -2, put it in as a positive. Your y-intercept on this form, you just put a 0 in for x's, and it ends up being your last value or your c value, so -6. So I've got 3, 0 as one of my zeros, -2, 0 is the other one. My vertex is at -6, which is like right there. So here is my function, my quadratic. A couple more on the next page, just as other examples. Number 3, this one's already in intercept form, so it's already kind of factored for you. If it helps, you could make that first x like x plus 0, and then 2x minus 3. You could kind of do it like that if you'd like. In my head, I tend to FOIL those out, and then I use the middle one, which is the quad form. So it really doesn't matter which way you do these problems, just kind of pick the one that makes the most sense to you or you remember the steps for. So for vertex, I'm going to do -b/2a. Oh, sorry, I should talk about, this is your a, that's your b, your c would then be 0. We'll tack that on there. Now I'll do your vertex. So x equals -3 all over 2 times 2. So I ended up with 3/4 for the first part of my vertex. Again, I would plug that in as a 0.75. I think you have a little bit more luck plugging it in correctly if you use a decimal. So 2 times 0.75 squared minus 3 times 0.75. And I end up with -1.125. And we're using that to graph, so about 3/4 and then -1 and just a little bit more. Puts me about there. My factors, it's already factored for me, so I can either use this set or this set. So I've got x and I've got 2x minus 3. Those are both good. You could actually solve both of those to find your zeros. I'm going to show you a different way on your calculator to find your zeros. So we did the quadratic formula, and now I'm going to show you how to graph and use your calculator. So I'm going to type in, oh, I already had it. I'm going to type in that equation right there, x and then 2x minus 3. We always hit that zoom 6, so we can always have kind of like a basic look at the graph. And then what you're looking for are these places where the graph crosses the x-axis. And you can actually find that by hitting second and then trace. And when we're doing our max and min in the same menu, and option number 2 is to find your 0. So I'm going to hit 2. And it actually walks you through the same prompt. So left bound, right bound, and then guess. So if that's the 0 we want to go after, it's kind of hard to tell where it is. I'm going to put my pen there. I'm going to get to the left side of it just to make sure I'm not on it, but I'm on the left. Then I'm going to move my cursor until I'm on the right of it. Okay, that's good. Remember on guess we always hit enter, and then it's going to give me my 0. So my 0 is actually at 0, 0. I'm going to go find the other one. So repeat the process, second calculate, down to 0. This time we want this one, so I just want to get on the left side of this, and I'll hit enter. And the right side, I'll hit enter. One more time on guess, hit enter. And it looks like my other 0 is 1.50. So you can use the quadratic formula. You can also use your calculator to help you, in that calculate menu to help you figure out the zeros. So your one 0 is at 0, 0, your other one's at 1.50. Your y-intercept, remember we just want to let x be 0. So if I do that, this would be 0, and then this would also be 0. So your y-intercept is at 0, 0. And there is my problem. That was terrible. I didn't even make that be rounded. There we go. Last one looks again like that middle quad formula, or form, quad form. So I'm going to do vertex as -b/2a. So -4 over 2 times 1 gives me a -2. And then I'm going to plug that in for all the x's. Make sure that you use parentheses here. Sorry, this lighting is really bad. -2 squared, and then plus 4 times -2 and plus a 5. So it gets me 1. All right. So I'm going to I'm just going to graph that, -2, 1, that's my vertex. Factors, zeros, y-intercept. For y-intercept, I'm just going to let those be 0, so that means I'm a 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right about there. And I need the mirror match on the other side. This is my axis of symmetry, so I just need to go on the other side and have a match. I know this parabola opens upwards, so that's pretty great. And then the last thing we have to find is our x-intercepts, which are factors but we don't even touch the x-axis right now. So let's try our quadratic formula just so you see what would happen. So if I run the program again, and I'm going to use 1, 4, and 5, I actually get an error, non-real answers. What your calculator is trying to tell you when you do that is not that you did something wrong, but that when you do the quadratic formula, the negative b plus or minus the square root of, it's trying to tell you that all of that stuff ended up negative. And you can't square root a negative, so it's trying to tell you there aren't any x-intercepts, which is totally fine. We can have a parabola that never touches the x-axis. That is totally possible. So today you just learned about the 3 different forms for quadratics and how to find the pieces for each so that you can graph these.